My family has a little vacation home in Colorado. My parents are avid skiers, which was the motivating factor behind that purchase. The home has been in the family since before I was born. It's definitely showing its age in a lot of ways, but it's also like 40 years old. It's not gonna look new. My dad's had to do a lot of upkeep on the place over the years. It's still in our family today, and it's really on its way out at this point. My dad talks about knocking it down and putting up a new place, but I don't really get involved in his decision. The story takes place like 15 years ago when I was 8 and my brother was 11. We were up in Colorado during a blizzard. The snowfall was insane, and of course, my brother and I had to go out and play in it. The great thing about going up there when we were kids was the sheer amount of space. The property has a huge opening with wood surrounding in all directions. There's a dead-end road that goes downhill which leads to a few more almost equally big properties. It's the perfect layout for hide-and-seek or snowball fights or any number of games like that. My brother Josh and I went out in our snow gear to play our snowball fight game with our own little custom rules. Basically, we'd set up 2 forts. We could pick our forts to be anywhere, but we had to tell each other where we were picking. We would then make one giant snowball as the so-called jewel that we'd have to successfully steal from the other base and bring back to ours. Josh chose to make his base on the nearest neighboring property. There was almost never a car, like 9 times out of 10 that we'd go there, so we'd often play games on their property too since they were never there. What we'd do is build little walls to emulate a fort, and then put the big snowball behind the walls. So to get to each other's bases in this game, we could either cut through the woods or take the road up or down to get to the opposite fort. Once Josh ran down the road and disappeared, I was supposed to wait for him to blow the whistle to signal that the game began. I waited for a while, like a long while, over 5 minutes. He had already set up his fort by then, so all he had to do was get back down there and blow the whistle. When it hit around maybe the 10-minute mark is when I decided I probably just couldn't hear the whistle from there, so I started plotting my route. Was it better to go through the woods or down the road? I opted for the road because honestly, going through the woods during a blizzard at 8 years old was a scary thought. I started trudging through the unplowed snow on the ground as flakes of snow blew into my face. With the amount of layers my mom made me put on though, I wasn't cold at all. As I approached the driveway to the neighboring property, I looked through the trees and didn't see Josh over there. With all the brush and trees bare in the winter, it was quite easy to see through the woods. So I cut into the property through the trees to kind of sneak in, but Josh was literally nowhere in sight. I saw his fort, so I looked around. When I could confirm he wasn't anywhere in sight, I approached his fort to grab the jewel. Before I could, I heard a woman's voice yelling out, "Excuse me, are you looking for your brother?" I turned in the direction it came from, and it was an older woman at the front door of the neighbor's house. I called back that we're playing a game. She responded with, "Your brother's in here." I was very confused. I started walking towards the front steps of the house, and as I got closer, the woman's face got clearer. To my 8-year-old mind, she looked a lot older than she probably was. As I got closer to the house, I noticed at one of the upstairs windows, there was someone looking out at me. For a second, I actually thought it was Josh. It was someone with half their face covered, presumably by a black beanie, and the bottom part of their face covered under the bottom of the window. I also noticed another trail of footprints leading to the front door. They had to be Josh's. The woman was giving me a very creepy smile. I remember that feeling of my heart dropping for some reason. She waved me inside to come in and get out of the cold. I stopped dead in my tracks and screamed, "Josh," but there was no response. The woman stopped smiling. She didn't expect me to do that. I also noticed that the other trail of footprints was doubled over. If it was Josh, his footprints turned around and headed back towards the woods. I then heard heavy footsteps from inside the house. They sounded like they were upstairs coming down. I started to run. The woman screamed something at me or someone else that I didn't understand. I looked back once at the house, and that face that was upstairs at the window before was no longer there. I ran off the property back on the road, running through my previous footsteps. I started to hear my dad's whistling from up the hill, the whistling he'd do to get my brother and I home at dinner time. When I made it back to our driveway, my dad and Josh were there already, having been on their way to get me. Before I could even try to explain what just happened, Josh was already telling me that there were people in the neighbor's house telling him to come inside. I said the same exact thing happened to me, so my dad went down there with some kind of weapon in his hand while we waited in the home with our mom. He came back after a long while and said that the front door was locked and no one was answering, so we went to another neighbor's house, and they knew the owners of the house and they called them. This part still gives me chills whenever my dad mentions what he was told. The owners of that house were not there that weekend. Nobody was supposed to be in the house. The cops were called and everything, and my brother and I did have to speak to one of the officers on scene to describe the woman. After that, we were no longer involved. According to my dad, the back door was unlocked and the house was investigated, which turned up nothing. For this reason, my parents took home any extra valuable things in fear of a break-in while we were gone. After that day, we steered clear of playing on that property just from the creepiness factor of that memory alone. Thank God we didn't go in that house. This is gonna sound a little weird, but bear with me. Every winter, my friends Kyle, Ricky, and I have this little tradition of walking out onto this frozen lake a few towns over. It's not some grand event or anything, we just do it for fun. There's something about the vibe of being out there on the ice, surrounded by the quiet stillness that feels almost otherworldly. It's just one of those simple things we've always enjoyed. Call us weird, but we can never get enough of the serenity. If you've ever been out in nature by yourself with the only sound being the gentle patter of snowflakes, you know what I'm talking about. It feels like you've got a piece of nature all to yourself. The photos always turn out great too, which is a huge plus for a couple of edgy guys like us. This happened this past winter. It's April as I'm writing this, so about 4 months ago now. I know what you're probably thinking, but don't worry, none of us fell through the ice. That's not what this story is about. It was snowing pretty heavily that night, which was the main reason we decided to go. It had been consistently below freezing for a couple of weeks too, so we were relatively confident the lake was completely frozen over. I'd personally take winter over summer any day of the week. I bet all my friends would agree. There are about a million reasons why, but one of them is as simple as the snowfall itself. First of all, it's just pretty. What I like most about it, though, is that you'll never find yourself in complete darkness. Even after sunset, the world isn't entirely dark. The light reflecting off the white snow blends day and night, so you're left with this really surreal feeling that doesn't arise from anything else. The moon was also pretty full that night, so that feeling was amplified. Kyle was driving that night. He had a pickup that handled pretty well in the snow, so we just played it safe and let him drive, even though Ricky was usually the one who chauffeured us around. The lake itself is surrounded by a thin forest, so we couldn't actually drive all the way to the water's edge. I don't think forest is the right word. It's really just a cluster of sparsely scattered trees, but it's more than enough to prevent a car from driving through. We parked in a nearby lot and got out of the car. It was freezing out. The three of us bundled up and walked toward the lake. I didn't smoke at the time, I still don't, but Ricky and Kyle both do, so they lit a couple of cigarettes as we walked. I think it was after midnight, but I can't say for sure. All I remember is that there wasn't a soul out there. Not an animal, not a person, nothing. No movement whatsoever besides the three of us. We reached the lake, and as we anticipated, it seemed completely frozen over. The three of us were laughing about something stupid when Kyle picked up a small boulder and chucked it onto the ice, testing its integrity. It didn't even crack. So we took that as an indication to make our way towards the middle of the lake. We obviously didn't go super far on the ice, that would have been careless, but we did venture a decent ways away from the ledge. We were maybe 100 feet out when something caught our attention. On the far side of the lake, near the edge where the trees bordered the ice, something big and dark was moving. We stopped talking immediately. We just stopped in our tracks, watching. Whatever it was large, hunched over, moving slowly toward the lake. Finally, we realized what we were looking at. It was a bear. Ricky was the first to say something. He whispered, "Is that a bear?" as quietly as he could. I didn't answer. My heart was already racing. If it was a bear, the last thing we wanted to do was draw its attention. We stood there frozen, not even daring to breathe too loudly. But then, as the figure moved closer, something felt off. The way it walked wasn't quite right. Too upright. Too human. It also looked like there was something dragging behind it. Nothing about it made sense. It was one of the most bizarre things I'd ever seen. And that's when it straightened up completely, and we realized the truth all at once. It wasn't a bear. It was a person wearing some kind of bear suit. Kyle said, "What the hell?" in a low voice, and I was thinking the same exact thing. I know it doesn't sound scary in a generic sense, but if you had been there, you would have been terrified too. I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. I don't know if I was more afraid or confused, but something told me to stay quiet. The figure kept moving toward the ice, dragging something behind him. At first, it was hard to tell what it was. The snow blurred the details, but as he got closer, I realized he was holding a rope that was attached to the thing he was dragging, and a few moments later, we could see it more clearly. It was a small black bag. It looked like a smaller sized garbage bag if they even made those. Either way, it was chilling. We stood there unsure of what to do. My mind was screaming at me to turn around and leave, but my body felt paralyzed. I couldn't move. I don't think Ricky and Kyle were too keen on turning around and leaving either, because neither one of them flinched. I probably wouldn't have left right then even if I hadn't been so scared. I needed to know what that person was doing. And then, as if the situation couldn't get any stranger, the man unzipped and stepped out of the bear suit. Seeing him as a person didn't make things any better. He wasn't particularly large or intimidating, but there was something unsettling about him. We watched as he bent down, presumably to pick up a rock, but I couldn't tell from so far away. And then the sound started. He knelt down holding what looked like a rock and began repeatedly slamming it into the ice. It might have been placebo, but I swear I could feel the vibration in the ice even from the distance. He was trying to break through, most likely to dispose of whatever was in that bag. Ricky tapped my shoulder, and I turned to see him and Kyle moving back towards solid ground. Without a word, I followed suit, and the three of us tried to move quickly without making too much noise. Every step felt deafening in the quiet, even though I knew there was no way that guy could hear the crunch of snow from that far away. We barely made it a few yards when a voice yelled out, "Hey," from behind us. I didn't even look back. I just started running, praying that guy didn't have a gun. The cold didn't help. I found myself starting to get winded after not even a minute of running. I don't know if he followed. I don't think he did, but in that moment, we were in full-on panic mode. We reached the edge of the lake, and at that point, I was gasping for breath. After a very short break, we made our way back to the car silently, and Kyle drove off immediately. None of us had any idea what we had just seen. Kyle said it was probably someone dumping their trash, but I told him that was ridiculous. Who in their right mind would dress up in a bear suit in the middle of the winter to illegally dump their trash? There was no way. Ricky said it was definitely someone dumping a body, but I told him the bag was way too small for that. The three of us talked about it the whole ride home, but we couldn't agree on a definite explanation. We never got an answer. The reason I'm thinking about this now is because my mom was watching TV the other day and an old missing persons report popped up on the screen. It was a child from around our area, and the timeline of his disappearance matched up pretty closely with what we had seen on that lake. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I know it's a long shot and probably just an unfortunate coincidence, but I can't help but wonder if those two things are somehow related. By the time you're hearing this, we've probably reported our sighting to the police.